To everyone. So welcome all to the panel 5. And the theme of the panel 5 is on the public participation in the governance of transboundary water resources. So for this panel, we have 3 distinguished speakers. First, Dr. Apisom Intralawan, who is a disciplinary researcher and a lecturer of ecological economics at Luang University, Thailand. And for the second speaker, we have Dr. Lobsang Yangtso, who is working as a senior researcher for the International Tibet Network, Dharamshala, India. And third, we have Dr. Mirza Zulfiqur Rahman, who is independent researcher on Himalayas from India. So since we are already lagging behind time, so I will skip the introduction part of them. All of you can refer it from the conference notebook. So to begin with today's theme, panel 5, I would like to first invite Dr. Apisom Intralawan. He will be giving a presentation on linking science to policy making. And
okay.
Dr. You have 20 minutes.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation. I'm Apisom Intralawan from Luang University. By training, I'm an engineer, but later on I'm having a degree on economics. So today I'm presenting a science and trying to link with the policy maker using the economic tools that we call CBA or cost benefit analysis. So my presentation will base on already published paper. One is about reviewing benefit and cost of hydropower in the lower Mekong, and another one about trade-off analysis. Also, another one is about alternative development pathway, because we think that if we want to have energy security, we have a better way to achieve that without increasing the pressure on the river. So background, you may have heard about 1957 plant in Mekong region. You know, at the time, the river is seen as an economic engine for poverty eradications and a source of tremendous potentialities of power production, irrigation, navigation, flood control. But this source is underutilized. This sentence was written in this book that is written in 1955 by UNESCAP. Yep. So you also have to understand that fishery and livelihoods in this region very much depend on the river. So fish play a very important role in terms of, like Mekong River is the second most biodiverse in terms of fishery in the world. So identified fish is about 900 species. It's the largest freshwater fishery in the world, and it also provides a cheap protein to the local communities. You can see that we are eating a lot of fish, particularly in Vietnam. Like in Vietnam, it's about 91 kilo per person per year. Thailand is a little bit less. We are consuming fish about 42 kilograms per person per year. And in terms of fishery production, Mekong account for about 20% of the global fishery sector. Not only about fish, very important as a food for the people. River also provide a cultural service. Like you are perfectly coming at the right time of the year. We have what we call Loi Krathong, which is a way that people are paying respect to the river. So, you can see lots of Loi Krathong. Yesterday, you also see the Naga fireball by Ajahn Apichai, right? So lots of tourism and revenue generated by the river outside of just consumption things, right? Well, of course, these regions are growing very fast. So particularly, you look at the electricity demand. We are using aircon all the time, talking about Cambodia and Vietnam. Cambodia, some of people don't have access to the grid electricity yet. Vietnam also growing very fast, and it will outgrow Thailand in the future. So this is, I extracted this information from power development plans of each country. You can see that at the moment, 2021, the demand of the electricity about 440 terawatt hour. In the next 10 years, it will be double. In the next another 20 years, it will be triple. So it's, how can I do the, yeah, you can see that at the moment it's 440 terawatt hour. In the future, it will be about 1,140, which is 3 times of the today's demand. Okay, well, because we need electricity, right? And because we already have planned about dams, which is in 1960, that's layout of the plans. So our government and our regions in this country are implementing this plan by building lots of dams. This is just the picture of the mainstream dam. I coming from the province that next to the Pak Bang dams here. So Chiang Rai is about here. So this is to give you the perspectives of dam building in this region. Before 1990, there are very few dams that over like 50 megawatt, But you can see that in the last decades, dam building are proliferated, very booming in these countries. And you can see that this is the amount of the installed capacity. You can see that it's increasing exponentially. So here, another thing that you should understand, I'm talking about the Thai context. At the moment, we have a big, huge reserve margin. So basically, we are producing about 50 megawatt per year, every year about that. And the peak is only 31,000 megawatt, So we have lots of extra, like about 20 megawatt, So it's about 40% of the demand. So at the moment, I also want to talk about the Pak Bang, Pak Le, Luang Prabang, and Sanakam, which just signed an PPA, power purchase agreement. Except Sanakam Dam is still ongoing process of, asking for more information from ONWR. So that Laos want to become a battery of Asia, right? That is how Laos envisioned herself to become a battery of Asia, and every country also needing electricity. So this is a perfect for Laos to build dam and trade the electricity with other countries in the regions. Well, dam provide lots of benefits, of course, in terms of electricity, in terms of flood control, in terms of navigation, facilitations, but it also have some negative impacts. Like this is the number that I get it from MRC. This is a forecast fish catch loss per year. I told you before that at the moment we get fish about 2.3 million tons per year. It will be go down to 400. We will lose about 400 and lost about 725,000 tons per year. So half of it will be gone, if we build all of the dams. This is 11 dam scenario. This is 6 dam scenarios. And on top of that, there are lots of problems along the riverine communities. This picture showing you that, they have riverbank erosions. So it said danger, don't go in because the riverbank is unstable. Well, not only about we lost fish, we also lost sediment. This is sediment loss. So if all the dam is built, you can see at the moment we have about 150 and it will become only 4. So 90% of the sediment will be trapping under the, behind the dams. So you can see that we lost sediment as well. And you know that sediment provide nutrients, provide riverine community garden, for example. So, yeah. So the questions become, should we go ahead with these projects, right? There must be a way to assess these projects, you know, and there are many things that many scientists working on this. Many talking about EIA, you know, so environmental impact assessment. Many talking about SEA, you know. Many talking about social impact assessment, you know. Many talking about dam is not very clean because it uses a lot of concrete and also iron, steel, you know, so there is lots of high carbon footprints. So, but today I'm going to talk with you about these tools that economics use a lot. It's called cost-benefit analysis. There is, of course, a benefits from dam. There is, of course, a cost of dam, right? So if a good project going ahead, you know, the benefit should be greater than the cost. But the bad project normally is the cost is greater than the benefits. So basin development plans, which is this report that produced by Mekong River Commission in 2011, there has this number, you know. So basically the positives, net present values. So in economics term, it means that this project is economically feasible. It's not only technically feasible, it's also benefit the society, you know. But after I come back from my study abroad, I went around in my hometown and I heard about the complaint about the dams. You know, the dam will impact us a lot. So that made me interested in why, you know, like if the MRC said it's good to the society, why many people complain? And I found out that many of the economic models that used under the BDP2, you know, are flawed. For example, they are not taking into the consideration the social impact. They're not taking into the consideration about sediment loss, something like that, you know. And they undervalues the fishery, and they overestimated the benefit from electricity. So if you're interested in more detail, you can read my paper, which I explicitly explain the model that I used. So every economist, or every modeler, they can use the model, right? But what models is correct, you know, so depends on the assumption that they use. Well, if we're not building dams, this is what second part of my presentation. Of course, we need electricity. Of course, the dam bringing more costs than the benefit from my perspectives. But how can we achieve the society needs, which we need the electricity? I think there is a way out. You know, especially nowadays, the solar technology are reducing in price. You know, so I think Indonesia just inaugurated the largest floating solar farm. You know, so this is 192 megawatt. You know, so in Thailand also starting to experiment this in Sirinthorn Dam. I think solar farm, you know, floating solar are having more advantage on the land-based dams, land-based solar, because there is no cost of land, there is no villagers settlement, and it has higher efficiency because of the temperature are lower. You know, and we can retrofit this system to the existing reservoir easily. You know, so that is my argument. And we now sign MOU with the Laos, you know, to import electricity from Laos. We already import about 5,000 megawatt. There is about 6,000 megawatt in negotiation, and the government decided to import from hydropower. So we did some scenario analysis. We have 4 scenarios. This is called business as usual. So we will go ahead with the large dams. And this would be the estimate investment cost, and this would be the levelized cost of energy. So basically, we are looking at dollars per megawatt hour for each option. And we found that, the cheapest one is a floating solar. So again, if you're interested in the detail, you can look at the report. Because of the limitation of times, I wouldn't be able to explain everything. Yeah, so, and then we are looking at, the 4 new dams that just being signed, basically Pak Bang, Pak Lai, Luang Prabang, and Sanakam. These 4 dams will produce about 3.8 gigawatt. So if we're not building this dam, can we have any other options? And the answer is also yes. We can retrofit. We need more gigawatt hour because solar cells are less efficient than hydropower because of it's only generate electricity during the daytime, right? For example, and it's also requires some battery storage to make the energy system more stable. But the advantage of floating solar is also the construction period, which only take 2 years compared to dam that taking about 5 to 6 years to complete. And also the costs are much more attractive. So then come to my last part of my presentation. The country that started to build dam in this region, which is the US, now they are removing them out of the system, particularly in like Portland, Columbia River, Klamath River, something like that. You heard about of this dam. But one of the article that I really want to invite you to read is, Mr. Scudder, he was the advisor to the World Bank to build Nam Turn dams in 1970s, and he is now approaching 80 years old. And he wrote a paper saying that this is a big mistake of his life. He shouldn't promoting the big dam in Laos because there are many problems. Nam Turn 2 confirmed my long-standing suspicion that task of building large dam is just too complex, too damaging to the priceless natural resources. So he is the world expert in dam building in 1970, and now 40 years later, he changed his mind that what he promoting is not worth the cost. Well, we talk about dams also not only generating electricity. Dam also help preventing flood and drought because dam change the hydrology, right? We have lots of hydrologists, guru in this room. But what I want to point out, this is the article from MRC. It's not from me, Mekong River need a flood pulse to drive the productivities. And flooding is not only bad thing. Flooding has a lot of benefit in terms of other things as well. And MRC explicitly said that, here, dam flood pulse benefit fishery, river morphology, sediment, and improve soil fertilities. And the average value of flood benefit is about 8 to 10 billions. But of course, flood has a cost as well. But you can see clearly that the benefit is greater than the cost. We have problem of flooding, especially the modern world, modern people, traditional people don't have problem with flooding because like if you go to, for example, Cambodia, you can see that they're living on the stilt, so they are very resilient to flood and droughts. And future prospect, well, many people talking about upstream and downstream. China is upstream, we are downstream people. But I want to put a new narrative. I think we are downstream people. Everything is interconnectedness and interdependence, like what Dalai Lama said. Even the country we are upstream, they are downstream to the Tibetan mountain or plateau or something like that. So in Europe, in America, in Australia, in many other countries, they're starting this program called, restoring river and floodplain. This is in Dutch, in Netherlands, rewilding projects, turn back the clock 500 years. So they just start to realize that, like engineering river have some benefits, but engineering river also having some costs. And, people starting to realize that there is a cost of, regulating river. Yesterday we really enjoyed the conversation like Sandra Potstrel, right? She is a Stockholm Water Nobel Prize. She's talking about irrigations, the last oasis. She's talking about replenish. She also talking about like in the future we have to restore this river ecosystem service. Well, how? Before we doing rewilding, maybe we have to do re-indigenizing, because local community, traditional knowledge play a very important role. They have been living in the world for thousands of years, right? But the modern science is only 200 years, and we have lots of problems. So I think we are facing what Ajahn Surachai talked about, biodiversity collapse, which is a global commons. We are not just facing just climate change or COVID or something that is very narrow. So if we broaden, the topics or the concern, like we are facing with the greater challenge, so we need to adapt and learn how to coexist with the nature. So this is my last slide. I just visited Pak Yam, Ban Pak Yam in Si Songkhram, in one of the tributary to the Mekong River that is undammed yet. It's a very sad story. You can see the boats are, pulling up because there is no more fish to catch. You can see this is called plala, hai parala, it is a fermented fish. They have thousands and thousands of these jars, because in the past there are lots of fish that they can catch, and then they preserve this fish, making fish sauce, making something like this. And now this fish jar is empty. So he told me that he don't know what option in the future will be. So I don't know either. But I want to remain hopeful that we can make some difference. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Apisom, for sharing the importance of Mekong River in terms of fishery and electricity generation, and also for the hydropower generation. And specifically sharing on the consequences, or you can say pros and cons of the hydropower project on the Mekong River, and also to highlight the future prospect of that. Thank you, Dr. Apisom. Now I would like to invite Dr. Lobsang Yangtso from the International Tibet Network, India. Today she will be giving presentation on public participation in the transboundary water management in the Mekong River.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Thunduangmola, for your kind introduction. So I have made a slight changes in my presentation where I thought that I should focus on Mekong, and maybe in the future I can focus public participation in Brahmaputra as well. And so I think in my presentation, this is a working paper, and I would appreciate for any recommendations and suggestions as well. And so in my presentation, I would like to focus on public participation from the perspective of international law, environment law, and then how that functions in China, and then, the ground implementation at the Tibetan area as well. So it's important first to understand what does it meant by transboundary water management and public participation. Because I think public participation can be interpreted differently by different, stakeholders and power. And so over here, it's really important that the views and concerns of public are identified and then incorporate public in the decision making by public institution is really, really important. So that's one understanding of what public participation can be meant in this presentation, because sometimes state might say that, creating awareness on environment is also another part of public participation, but then will that creating awareness gives a avenue for the people to make changes or comments on the project is another issue that we have to look about. So I think I would like to focus on public participation in international water law as applicable to India, to China. So China has a treaty with its neighboring countries, and so but this treaty, whether this treaty has a direct, relation in terms of relation with the public participation is another issue that we really have to look towards. And in terms of treaty, so this treaty, has a special focus on exploitation of freshwater resources. And so with, I think in terms of Brahmaputra, China does not have a treaty with India or Bangladesh as well. And then another category of treaties that China has participated is border treaties, which contain reference to sustainable exploitation of watercourse, which determines border. So these are the various treaties that we have seen. And then it's also important in terms of international treaties that address the environment issues, and which has in a way, direct or indirect linked with the, public participation. And so these are the, the various, treaties that China is a part of. And it's also really important for us to, go on each of these agreement and what this agreement talks about the public participation. But then the two convention that China is not part of or not signed is one is the UN Convention on the Law of Non-Navigational UN Watercourse Convention, and then Convention on Protection and Use of Transboundary Watercourse and International Lakes. So what does it say? Because I think if you sign a convention of these two, in a way, it could be also possible that the state loses its sovereignty, right? So if you are part of a convention, then you have to abide all the rules and regulations. So this could be maybe one reason that China has not signed these conventions, because if you have signed the convention in terms of transboundary, then the question is whether it's a legally binding or whether you follow the regulation. Then you are answerable to the whole committee, and then attention on international implementation is another that we can really look into. But then when we look over here, I think the Rio Declaration on Environment and Development has been the one that really pushes for public participation. And from that, from this declaration, then slowly, sir, can you please give me 10 minutes? I'll just finish my presentation. And after that, we can have a good discussion. Yeah, sorry. So the Rio Declaration has really encouraged the other, conventions to, discuss about the public participation. Because in the Rio Declarations, it talks about access to information. When we talk about public participation, it talks about access to information, and then participation in decision-making process, and the communities, and also access to the judicial and administrative proceedings are really, really important when we say about public participations. So when we talk about public participation in transboundary water management, so all of these information or facilities should be available for the public, which we can call that, you know, this is the public participation that really needs in terms of transboundary water management. In terms of international provision, the China's implementation of international provision of public participation, so they are different treaties and Convention on Combat Desertification, and then UNFCCC, and then, so when we look in these various, there are various international treaties that China has signed, and how China interpret with the law on public participation. Sometimes, you know, it could be also just as a recommendation where the treaties recommend the states to have a public participation, which does not give a strong, command on the public participation. And then in terms of UNFCCC, it's really important about the various mechanism as well. And then when we talk about Convention on Combat Desertification, which China is also part of, it has a little mention about the public participation. So which in a way also gives lots of scope for the state to interpret what public participation means. And then we have to also look about the China's water law and what it talks about public participation as well. So one is about the Constitution of 1982, which amended in 2018. It says very, very little about the public participation. And then 5-year plans are also very important government policies that has a lot of policy recommendations or policy formulation for the whole area. So in terms of public participation in the 5-year plans that we see every 5 years, it gives a very recommendation, but then it's the wording on public participation is not very strict, or it does not require any legally binding in terms of public participation. And then environment protection law also, in terms of environment protection law, so for them, public participation means closure of information. So that is considered as a public participation, right? And what about in terms of policy making? What about the legal rights of the people when they go and complain, right? So that is another issue that we find over here. And then the previous speaker talked about environment impact assessment, so which is very, very important, but then environment impact assessment in China has a flaw as well, because sometimes the company, they would not do the environment impact assessment because giving a fine is, the fine is much cheaper than, doing an environment impact assessment. So which has, I think, a big challenge over here. But then, so as we look in previous slides, we studied about what does the public participation say in the International Environment-Related Convention, and then in China in their domestic policies, water policies, and then now we come in terms of implementation and the Chinese government's implementation of public participation in Tibet and Tibetans. The Snowline Great Rivers Environment Protection Association is one environment NGO that is set up near the sources of Mekong River. And in that, the General Secretary of the Snowline Great River Environment Protection, Tashi Doje, so he says that locals are the main protector of the environment, and they are the permanent residents. And so nobody understands the grassland better, and they feel close, and it is so personal for them when they see environment degradation. So that's their understanding. And when the locals get involved with the environment work, so it's all about their life, and then it's also because of the influence of the religion, the Pön and the Tibetan Buddhism. So it's very difficult to differentiate whether it's a culture or the influence of the awareness of the environment as well. And so the Snowline River Environment Protection Association, they also mobilize the local people to protect the environment and to protect the environment in terms of cleaning water, waste management, and then so what they do over here is the volunteers to patrol the water sources. So in a way, as the previous speaker talked about how the upstream and downstreams are related. So the upstream work, I think the individuals, local individuals, how they protect has also, I hope that, implication on the downstream as well. And then we see Kamasamdu. Kamasamdu established the Snowline Great River Environment Protection. So what happened was like, so when he set up, so he's a philanthropist, and he has done lots of work in terms of environment protection. But then after a certain time, so he has been in prison for 15 years since 2010. So we expect that he might get released. I think from 2025, it would be 15 years. 15 years of his sentence, and so my organization works on his case. But in reality, right now, there is no information about his condition. So that's the only information that I can share with you right now. And it's really important, because sometimes people, even after finishing their sentence, they will they get, whether they get a medical facility or access to a lawyer is another issue. But sometimes they might get released, sometimes they might not get released. Sometimes when they get released, they might be in a very critical health situation. And there are cases that some political prisoners or environment defenders, they get released quickly, and then after a few months or a few years, because of their health condition, they die as well. So I really hope that this wouldn't be the case with the Kamasamtu, because I personally really appreciate his work in terms of environment protection. So in terms of environment defenders, right, so it's really important that, because earlier when we talk about a public participation, we have a different categories of public participations, right? But then in a practical, in reality, in terms of implementation, right, so they, Tibetan environment defenders, they are not in the environment or climate policy implementations. And most of them, they fight against the mining, damming, and illegal land grabs and damming as well. And so another case is that, to criminalize the whole environmental activism is another problem that we see. And another issue is also that limited information on them. And since 2008, since the Beijing Olympic, and in 2008, so we had a huge uprising in all over Tibet. So since from them, the protest, the arrest of, the environment defender, the cases has been increasing each year. So this is a report released by International Campaign for Tibet in 2022, and they studied 20 prosecuted Tibetan environment defenders. So out of 50 prosecuted environment, defenders, so what we see is here that, it's the 21, out of 50, the 21 environment defenders are serving their prisons, and the 20 people they weigh about is unknown, And then 5 people have completed their sentences, and 4 people died due to abuse by state agents in a protest or in a custody. So out of these 50 known cases, there could be many unknown cases as well. So when we look in terms of environment defenders, mining is another issue that they talk about, and then poaching, land appropriation, and then, the meat. And so these are the major, problem issues that they really highlight when it comes to environment defenders' work. So another, I think, I would like to highlight over here is the 2017 at the Mekong region. So there has been a clash with the Tibetans, so there has been a case of water diversion, and the local Tibetans protest. But then access to a lawyer or access to a document is another problem that we see. And so when the local people, they peacefully protest, so the Chinese militaries, they would come, and then, 40 Tibetans have been, arrested. And then so out of that 40 Tibetans, so local leaders would arrest. And so sometimes, they have been, dealt with, using tear gas, and then imprison the local leaders, creating fear among, and then not knowing how to communicate and way to take this case in the above is another problem that we see. So when we talk about the Mekong region, Sangjang Yuan Nature Reserve or the National Park or Nature Reserve is another big project that China is implementing a lot. And Sangjang Yuan Nature Reserve has an impact on Mekong River on the upstream. So what they have a plan is that they remove the local Tibetans from this area so that they can create a nature reserve. So the concept of that is to protect the land and to protect the ecosystem. But then what happens to the people living in this area who has been living in these areas for thousands of years? So this is another major, whether the Sangjang Yuan Nature Park, what happens is that it's the state who owns the national park, and then there has been another, policy where say that, once the people are removed and you have a national park or nature reserve, mining could be carried out by the local government, because in terms of implementation, local government has a power, right? So another issue in terms of Sangjang Yuan National Park at the head of the Mekong River is removal of Tibetan nomads from this area, because Tibetan nomads, there are huge grasslands over there, and so they want to remove the nomads from the grasslands, saying that this could be nomads could be the one reason where we see, grassland degradation. So in the name of ecological protection or, grassland protection, nomads get removed. So which has, because as we said earlier, people are the one who understand the nature and who has been protecting the land. But in reality, people are removed in the name of so-called ecological protection or ecological civilization. Or another reason of Chinese policy of removing the Tibetan nomads from their grassland is poverty elevation, saying that the livelihood of Tibetan nomads are very backward, so we want to make you rich. So you leave the grassland, you come in the city, and then remain unemployed. So finally, I would like to conclude by saying that, in Tibet right now, in terms of public participation, economic development has been given more importance, because the local governments, they get incentive and they get permission when they bring, economic development projects. And another challenge in terms of policy, maybe some policies, they look really good in paper, but then it's a decentralized, right? At the local level, local government has a power to implement, right? So when the local government has a power to implement the policy, then they would give more preference for the economic development at the cost of environment degradation. And then, failure to acknowledge the citizens' right, and then, it's decentralized. And then I would like to say that, inclusion of local people in the whole decision-making should be, implemented as mentioned or as vaguely mentioned in the paper, because one example is that when the Chinese government, they release documents or environmental laws, it never gets one paper that law that I note, it never gets translated into a Tibetan language, because the Tibetan and the Chinese language are completely different, right? So this is a very basic step that the state has to take when you want the public to participate, because as I mentioned earlier, China has signed many of the international treaties, right? So the policy at the top, but the implementation has to match. And so thus I would like to say that effective access to judicial and administrative proceedings, giving documents in Tibetan language, keeping the Tibetans in the environmental lawyer, and then really, making efforts to bring the local people in the decision making is, so that could be the ideal when we say public participation. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lobsang Yangsula. As she have mentioned in her presentation that environmental issues are best handled by, with the participation of all concerned citizens at the relevant level. So I think she has covered a very important topic that is highly needed to be discussed at this time. And I really want to thank Dr. Lobsang Yangsula for also giving presentation on the detailed analysis of the environmental defender and their negative consequences for the public participation in Tibet. So thank you so much. Now I would like to invite Dr. Mirza Zulfiqur Rahman, an independent researcher on Himalayas from India. Today he is going to give a presentation on towards building transboundary solidarity in precarious ecologies.
Thank you. Thank you to Tibet Policy Institute and Chulalongkorn University for hosting us here, and for inviting and being able to gather together to discuss about what collectively stands in front of us in terms of the everyday, precarity that I just want to talk about today. Actually, the whole aspect of today's presentation that I want to touch upon is to how we can actually explore together and bring forward possible ways of and strategies of building a transboundary solidarity amongst not only nation states but also among communities living in the larger eco-region, so to say. We live in a very diverse bioregion in South Asia and Southeast Asia, and the larger Himalayas is basically encompasses this bioregion overall, this eco-region. So I think we need to also have this kind of a larger bioregional kind of solidarity, a transboundary solidarity, which basically can bring us all together to work towards our the ways that and the challenges that confront us in terms of ecological precarity. When I talk about this picture that you see on the slide here, this is a picture of which you actually can see the icy mountains of Tibet, basically, from Arunachal Pradesh in India. So, in a sense that it also marks out basically the whole connectedness of the regions that we share. And this is where I also come from, Assam, in the northeast of India. Yeah. So basically, I just wanted to basically point out certain aspects of how the the imagination of our geography, the geographical space that we live in, is now becoming so kind of instrumental to borders, basically, to nation-state containers and understandings which are not, the traditional way of understanding spaces was in terms of rivers, forests, valleys, mountains, and that actually signified the natural features of any geographical space. But the larger understanding of this is a space where you could actually see the space of the Sundarbans here, Bangladesh here, the river Brahmaputra coming in from Northeast India here, through Assam, joining the Ganges coming in from here, many rivers coming like the Tista, and many tributaries joining here. And you could see parts of Bhutan here, parts of Myanmar, and basically straddling space which is South Asia and Southeast Asia. But when the natural imagination is this, but what our imagination then becomes, so much containerized in the nation state, in the whole the whole nation state kind of framing. Where we can now see that, almost the similar geographical space, but we always keep on talking about this borders, nation-state borders, determining our rivers systems. But when we actually see this picture, also we see that the river systems that actually emanate from the Tibetan plateau are actually the connectors. And goes against the grain of nation-state borders, and is connecting this larger geography in a larger bioregion, in a larger eco-region. And that is where basically I think is where our solidarity, the transboundary solidarity I was talking about, should lie. In a way to actually be able to, a lot of these aspects at the frontiers, basically, the nation state also attempts, in a way, to basically build this precarity over time. And how is this precarity built over time? Is not through climate change only. Climate change is only one part of it, which we see the destabilizing factor, that the erratic nature of climate change, but also a long-term infrastructural development on that space, where rivers, hills, forests, valleys by themselves are not enough sovereignty markers. But when you actually have the nation-state borders, you need big hydropower dams, you need a kind of a concrete infrastructures to actually mark out your sovereignty along the river basins. So in that sense, I think nation states have also seen this kind of a space like that from a very bordered perspective. While communities have a very different imagination, who have lived along these rivers, have moved along these rivers, rivers have moved, and not tried to move the rivers as they have moved. So there's a very basic difference between how communities grapple with everyday disasters and how governments grapple with everyday disasters in these spaces. So it is also as to how I would like to bring this kind of that we are all precarious, collective precarious, living in this precarious ecology. And this everyday sense of precariousness is also built by a everyday sense of democratic deficit that we see in our everyday lives. There is a lack of a sense of how communities are not being able to meaningfully participate in decision making on environmental issues. We do not want to basically make decisions on currency issues or defense issues or anything which are high politics, but we do want to actually make decisions on everyday environmental issues which connect to our livelihood, our ecology, and to our community life. That is actually missing in many ways, be it all across, I think, the countries in South Asia and Southeast Asia, I think. That this everyday democratic deficit is actually underlining this precarity, and the precarity is embedded now in the landscape through such bordering practices, through such infrastructuring practices which go along these bordering practices as well. So I think that is also very, very important to note. The consequences, as this picture also shows, as that we are actually in a kind of interwoven, in a very intricate mix, in a sense of how the landscape. We have to imitate the landscape or the natural landscape to actually build this kind of solidarity going into the future. What actually Northeast India is also seen now by the government as a kind of India's land of rising hydropower and all of that. Many hydropower dams are being planned. A lot of these hydropower dams are also kind of marked out as signaling vis-a-vis China. In the race of kind of building these mega dams, we are not against all dams. We are small dams are sometimes beneficial, but mega dams sometimes are big sovereignty markers in the landscape, as China is doing in Tibet. Many others are also doing all across the river basins that are shared in South Asia and Southeast Asia. What this does is that the overall precarity that the Himalayan communities face in their everyday lives is determined by this explosion of interest in terms of building hydropower for nation building and all of that. While these Himalayan communities are very small in numbers. In population, it is very small in numbers, while the basic population concentration is away from the Himalayan kind of belt, so to say. So, but the hazards, the precariousness is much more amplified in the Himalayas, as we now saw in Sikkim, in the Sungthang dam disaster recently. The entire dam was washed away, and the whole aspect of the living in the shadow of such precarious ecologies is now become a kind of a sense of everyday life, which we also need to address through the whole aspect of precarity is also seen in terms of traditional knowledge systems which are available with communities. The communities are not being able to use them meaningfully anymore in the face of disasters. The pace and the scale of infrastructural interventions is so quick and so at a different scale that communities are not being able to meaningfully use their indigenous knowledge, knowledge to be able to counter any sense of climate change. So in that sense, that there is an overall sense of hopelessness that is coming in to communities, and saying that we actually now want to move away from our rivers. We want to move away from our ecologies and move away to urban settlements, towns and cities. So that is again. So what this picture also shows that in the terms of how we want to connect, in terms of economic connectivity that we want to promote, we are actually slowly rupturing ecological connectivity at the same time, which actually should not be the case. Many Himalayan rivers are now actually being planned to be dammed. The rivers in, for example, in Bhutan, for example, are also being dammed. This is a picture of the Mochu Pochu near Punakha. This is the picture of the river Siang, which actually is the Yalong Sangpo, which comes through Tibet and enters Arunachal Pradesh. And a total of 36 hydropower dams are being built, planned to be built in this river basin on the Siang. 3 big ones and 33 small ones. And the local communities are also, protesting against these dams for a long time now. This is also the pace of life in this region. So in a sense, this picture I wanted to show to you is because the government seems to have a lot of money to be building dams, in this region, but is at the same time correspondingly they are not actually investing on the social infrastructure. needs of the common people. Very basic things such as healthcare, education, proper sanitation, drinking water, and market facilities are not available to many remote communities still today. So the physical infrastructure is always being, given incentives, while the social infrastructure needs of the people are not really given that much of a kind of a sense. So in that sense, I think that is also a kind of a mismatch which and also the region is very, very flood prone. Traditionally, the larger infrastructures that are being embedded in the, yesterday there was discussion about this engineered kind of landscape, engineered rivers. This is a picture from Majuli in Assam, which actually faces floods every day, every year. 6 months of the year is all spent in tackling floods. But overall, a larger kind of a maze of infrastructure has been built which actually embeds the disaster right in the riverbed. Embeds the precariousness right in the riverbed. And this is the, engineering or infrastructuring floods in the river system is known as. And that is being very well done over a period of time. And that actually, the whole aspect of public participation in decision making is missing, and therefore the communities are not also able to transfer traditional knowledge and historical knowledge and oral history knowledge to such projects. Because there was a case 2 years back where in Assam there was a big flood and many railway bridges were washed away, many highways were washed away. But the communities were always telling to the government that there are underwater spring where actually your alignment is going through, and you have started building there. And they were always telling them, but they never listened. The contractors went ahead and built it. But when it was washed away 2 years back, the communities came back and said that, we always told you that we never, used to build any pathways through that, and we always warned you. But then this kind of interaction is missing, and the basic sense of democratic deficit underlines that. I would like to end here with this picture, which is the living root bridges of Meghalaya. Which is one of the ecological wonders of the region. This picture I wanted to show in order to also reflect on the intergenerational sharing that we need to actually reflect on. When the communities, the village people who actually start building this living root bridge, they very well know that they will never be able to use it in their own lifetime. So it takes about more than 60, 70 years to build a root bridge such as this. And the people who embark on building this bridge will very well know that they will never be used to themselves, but they are doing it for the future generations. So I think we also need to build this collective transboundary solidarity together in order to actually build this kind of, intergenerational sharing and responsibility towards our future generations. And that is why we need to, kind of work together. So I think we can have more discussions. I will stop here. Maybe in the discussions we can take it forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mirza, Zulfiqur, for a very informative presentation. Now we will move on to Q&A session. So I'm going to pass my mic to the audience.
Thank you very much. And I think it was like